This week on Cosmic Sponge, Jim's computer explodes, Bigfoot goes vegan, Ireland sees an increase in UFO incidents, home improvement exorcisms, Frankenfish, lucid dreams, alien space junk, black hole power sources, and the dangers of fishing during a UFO flap. Oh, and Jim continues to struggle with English, while Stephen perfects his Irish accent.
That was in the Magaberry.
Magaberry. This is what they found out.
Hey, that's pretty good.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk about UFOs and other weird wonders in the world. I'm Stephen Hall.
And I'm Jimmy Coe.
Tonight, we are going way down south to cover the old Pascagoula Ufo Abduction, one of the most well-known cases. Now, we touched on this subject once before, I think in our Betty and Barney Hill. We talked about it just a little bit, but we want to cover it a whole lot more in depth this go-around. Before we get into that, and also I'd like to apologize that we've been running a bit late the past 2 weeks. A lot of stuff with the holidays, plus Jimmy's computer blew up, just some other technical issues. We plan to get back on track and release an episode every Sunday starting after the first of the year. So anyway, thanks everyone for listening, and thanks for all of the, hey, where's the podcast this week? Jimmy, what you been up to this week?
My computer blew up. It took me a full day to get it back up and running, cannibalizing parts from some of the other machines laying around here. This room looks like a computer graveyard. There's computers everywhere. That's what you get for being a software engineer. You just hoard stuff just in case things blow up.
Oh, yeah, man. I got computer motherboards, CPUs, hard drives. I mean, I got crap everywhere in my back room. So a couple of derelict computers that if I need something, I can yank it out of it, you know.
Yeah, every time I come for a visit and head back there, I'm like, it's like home.
Home sweet home.
Mm-hmm.
So have you seen anything good in the news this week?
You're going to love this. Hey, did you know that Bigfoot is going vegan?
Well, everyone else is, so why that really doesn't surprise me. In fact, I always thought that he was vegan. I mean, I know there's been reports that Bigfoot has been seen chasing deer or, lapping up roadkill or something like that from time to time.
Lapping up roadkill.
I've always thought that his dietary requirements tended more toward the herbivore.
There is a new video out, and I posted it to our Facebook page. And James Cromwell voices this little animated Bigfoot. I did not know this was a thing. Veganary. That's, I guess, how they say it. It's vegan.
Good work.
Shut up. It's going vegan in January is what you do. So for the whole month of January, you just you just do vegan. And James Cromwell, the actor, he's the guy who played the farmer in that pig movie. You know, where the pig thinks it's a sheepdog. Babe. Is. Yeah, you ever see the movie Babe?
I've seen that. Yeah,
that's a good movie.
That. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the farmer. That actor is James Cromwell. He's also in L.A. Confidential. Well, anyway, he voices the Bigfoot in this little animated thing, trying to encourage other Sasquatch-type creatures and hominoids to go vegan for January. And I was like, oh, yeah. We're posting this, baby.
Man, don't ask me to do veganary. I would literally starve to death. I mean,
I would be fine.
No way. You're pretty much a vegan now.
Oh, no, fish. No, I eat eggs too, and cheese.
Oh, okay. Eggs and fish.
And fish, yeah. I'm a pescatarian.
I guess you can't eat eggs. What about cheese? Can you eat cheese if you're vegan? Okay.
Sure. Yeah,
Can you have a glass of milk?
Yeah, if I want to. And generally stay away from it.
No, I mean if you're a vegan.
Oh, if you're vegan, you can't have any of that stuff. You can't have eggs, cheese, anything.
Why can't you have milk if you're a vegan?
It's a byproduct of an animal. I don't understand it. I just know that's what they think. Hey, look, to each their own, I say.
Yeah, sure. Live and let live is what I say. I just like to live with meat. That's, that's the way right. I roll.
I don't need anything with a face unless it's a sad face.
Right. So I got one for you.
All right. Let's hear it.
In Northern Ireland, it appears that UFO abductions are up.
What? Up, you say?
Up. UFO sightings. The police have received 8 unexplained sightings in 2021, including white lights and strange images on CCTV. 6 reports in 2020, 4 in 2019 of UFOs. They had 8 sightings in 2021. They include one report of a spaceship with flashing lights in Downpatrick area on January 17th of last year. In May, police received 2 sighting reports, one of white lights and an odd disc seen in the sky in the Slemish area of the county of Antrim at the end of the month. Strange images on CCTV. I think we've got an alien abduction here from September. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I remember that helicopter thing. That was in the Magaberry.
Magaberry. This is what they found out.
Hey, that's pretty good. At least to my American ears. It was like following the helicopter, right? Some weird lights following the helicopter. Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, UFOs are up in Northern Ireland. It's pretty much all I have, but I'll post the story to Facebook, and you can read all the details to your delight, listeners.
Hey, you're going to love this next one. Coming back to the States from Northern Ireland. North of us is the state of Pennsylvania, and they have a website called penlive.com. And you go there, and they'll have weird stories from time to time. Well, they just posted their weird stories for 2021. And I'm just going to go through a few of them, the ones that I enjoyed. Number 1, the power of mulch compels you.
I like it already.
Heads spun over the summer after news broke of an exorcism being held at a Home Depot in Lackawanna County. The group behind the exorcism later said they were conducting the ritual on behalf of trees that had been turned into lumber.
Wow. You know, I would love to have one of them on the show as a guest and explain that.
It's probably just a bunch of guys being stupid, getting high on pot and moving lumber.
I don't know, man. I don't know. Maybe. What was one of the other? Was there another weird story that they posted?
Oh, they're all weird.
Well, let's have another one.
Did you know that more than 1,000 pounds of frankenfish, that's those snakehead fish, were pulled from the Susquehanna River over the spring? Well, they were.
Yeah, those things are...
very invasive.
Yeah, but you know, I've seen a couple of shows. I like fishing. It's one of my pastimes. You know, I saw where actually they are allegedly very tasty down south in Florida and stuff. They're very aggressive, apparently very fun to fish. I've never caught one, like the snakeheads and stuff, but you know, it's bad for some of our native species. But on the other hand, not all the species that have been stocked in all the rivers and lakes in our area are really native to that area anyway. It's just our typical game fish. They're pretty fun and apparently are very tasty.
And very invasive and kill off all the other fish.
Yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah. Don't they come from like Asia?
Yes. If I'm not mistaken, I could be off on this, but I believe that a Chinese immigrant or national or just someone of Chinese descent had smuggled them into the country, was keeping them in a pond on a golf course. Snakehead fish can move over the land and migrate to other bodies of water, and that's how it got started in the United States.
Holy crap.
There may have been other instances of that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, people flushing them down the toilet.
Not
with their
100% sure that it was a Chinese person, but I'm pretty sure it was someone from Asia that brought them in to actually serve, cook and serve in a restaurant.
Well, if they're tasty, yeah.
Yeah, that's what they say.
So, moving on from that, there's another site called Live Science. They put out Science.
She blinded me.
9 things we learned about aliens in 2021. 1, that UFOs are real and the government knows it. Black holes could be alien powerhouses. Space junk from other alien civilizations might be in our solar system, and that's that Avi Loeb guy from Harvard who's looking into it. That's one of the things he says is a possibility, so something they're looking at. And then the thing that's really relevant for tonight, and it's a segue. Alien abductions could be lucid dreams. Lucid dreaming, in which people are partially aware and can control their dreams during sleep, could explain so-called alien abduction stories, a study from July suggests. Claims of such abductions date to the 19th century. The circumstances of kidnappings often sound dreamlike and trigger feelings of terror and paralysis. Scientists prompted 152 lucid dreamers to dream about encounters with aliens or UFOs and found that a number of sleepers reported dreams that resembled actual descriptions of alleged alien abductions. Of those who described their dream encounters as realistic, 24% also experienced sleep paralysis and intense fear.
I think I've told you before, I've experienced sleep paralysis a couple of times, one pretty recently. It was very strange. Yeah, I was going, help me. And my wife just busted out laughing, because I woke up as I was doing it, woke her up. Well, this happened again just recently, maybe a month ago. And she couldn't understand what I was saying. And I don't really remember what happened in the dream. But yeah, I woke up with that whole sleep paralysis thing. And what it is your mind paralyzes the rest of your body so that when you're dreaming, you don't thrash around and roll out of bed and do all this kind of stuff, right? So your body reacts to that and paralyzes your limbs. So as you're coming out of one of those lucid dreams, I've experienced that. It's very strange. Never really felt the fear thing. And I know some people say they feel as if there is a presence in the room, but I know that's a common occurrence as well. And I think that could explain many of the alien abduction experiences, but I think there are some that are very hard to explain away. One of them that we've covered before is Travis Walton. I don't know if Travis Walton's experiences, as we talked about in a previous episode, because if his experiences are accurate, I question it because, again, he said he was able to remember it after being hypnotized. And I just feel like there's too much suggestion during hypnosis. It's pretty clear he was abducted by some type of flying saucer, some type of craft that no one could explain. I mean, there were 5 other witnesses, right? Tonight, we're going to be talking about another such case that I think is very hard to explain away, saying sleep paralysis or, one of these other phenomena. These 2 men in Pascagoula, Mississippi in 1973 were fishing and had this experience. And when they came around, it just, these guys didn't fall asleep on the bank. It was a shared experience that they both could compare notes to. So they just really, the odds of 2 people having some kind of strange dream or something like that are just practically nil. There's no way 2 people could share that type of experience. And we're going to be getting into that here in just a few minutes. As we're recording this, the contest is still going on, but probably are not going to hear this until after it ends because it ends December 31st. Just remember, we plan to announce the winner on January 9th. But before we jump into tonight's episode, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast, especially on Apple iTunes, because that helps other people find the show. If you like what you hear, please consider supporting the show by going to our webpage, cosmicsponge.com. Look for the coffee cup icon in the upper right-hand corner that's called Buy Me a Coffee. Click on that, and you can pledge some support and throw some dollars our way so we can keep this thing rolling. While you're there, check out our web store. Also, check us out on Instagram and Facebook. Many of the stories that we talked about tonight will be on Facebook. And if you would like to reach out to the show, our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. So, Jimmy, let's move on to Pascagoula. What do you think? I know you've done some legwork on this subject, so why don't you kick us off with the whole rundown of this very famous UFO abduction?
On October 11th, 1973, 2 shipyard workers were fishing the west bank of the Pascagoula River, about a mile inland from the Gulf of Mexico. They arrived at the abandoned Shaw Peter shipyard after leaving the first fishing spot due to swarming bugs. The shipyard had fewer lights, thus attracting fewer insects. The younger man, 18-year-old Calvin Parker, noticed the no trespassing signs posted about the yard and, not wanting to get into trouble, mentioned it to his companion. Charlie Hickson, age 47, assured Calvin it was okay to fish there. He had done so many times himself and not to worry. They set up on an old metal pier and started fishing. At one point in the evening, the men noticed a blue light reflecting off of the water emanating from something behind them. Turning, they half expected to see a police car and officers called in to run them off the property. Both men were astonished, however, to see a spacecraft about 30 feet wide and 8 feet tall, hovering a mere 2 feet off the ground. The door on the craft slid open, overwhelming Charlie and Calvin with a blinding white light. Squinting, they could make out 3 bizarre creatures coming from the craft. They were short, between 4 and 5 feet tall. Their build was stocky, not unlike that of a football player. They had wrinkled, gray skin reminding them of an elephant's hide, and they had no neck.
There was Lou Elizondo.
Leave Lou out of this, man. They had no neck, like Lou Elizondo. Where would you expect to find hands? They had crab-like appendages, like Lou Elizondo. Wait a minute. No, come on.
It was you, not me.
Lose my man. Their feet were rounded with no toes, and they moved in a manner which both men would later describe as mechanical. 3 pointed protrusions from the head were located roughly where the ears and nose would be on a human. As they floated toward the men, they became paralyzed. Unable to move, the creatures took Charlie and Calvin inside the ship. After a brief examination, a more feminine being entered the room and at one point reassured Calvin he would not be harmed. After the examinations, the original creatures returned and left the men on the riverbank. What happened next would cement this abduction case as one of the most compelling in modern UFO lore. So that is essentially the abduction. There are some details I left out, but that's essentially it. What makes this something that stuck is what happens to Charlie and Calvin after the abduction.
After these 2 men have this very disturbing encounter, they try to decide what to do. Now, I know if it were me, and say me and Jimmy was out fishing and that happened to me, I know I would be very careful about who I would talk to, right? You don't want to be labeled crazy and all that kind of stuff. I don't know about Jimmy, but I know for me, I would want to think very carefully about what I was going to do next. But what these men do is they had this very disturbing experience. I'm not sure who, but one of them decides, you know what? We really need to tell the authorities about this because this craft is going around and abducting people. It took us against our will, performed these experiments, and dropped us back over here. It was very terrifying. All right, so they go to a local store and decide, at first they call the Air Force, the local Air Force office. I'm not sure where they got the number or whatever. The Air Force tells them that they no longer take UFO reports, of course, because this, Project Blue Book had ended in 1969. So this is 1973. And then whoever they talk to in the Air Force recommend that they contact the local police. And so they reach out to their local sheriff's office.
Charlie Hickson is the one who's calling. He calls Glenn Ryder, who's one of the officers at the station, and says, "You're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you. What just happened to me, my friend, while we were fishing. You're just going to laugh at me." And he says, "I'm not going to laugh, sir. Just go ahead and tell me what happened." He said, "Well, we got abducted by a spaceship." And then Glenn says he laughed.
Well, I mean, real quick, put yourself in that police officer's shoes. Hey, look, I'm a believer in these things, but if somebody just said, "You're not going to believe what happened, I just got abducted by a spaceship," yeah, you'd take a step back. I mean, really, No.
If I were a police officer, I would have been professional and said, "Well, sir, was it the Greys or was it the
the lizard people?
Did he have lizard-like eyes, sir?"
Yeah. Yeah, well, anyway, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt it.
So the police officer, worrying that they might have been drinking too much, I don't know where he got that idea, he says, "Stay where you are. Where are you? You stay there. I'm going to come to you, and we'll sort this out." The police officer goes to the location, and when he gets there, he sees how sincere and how terrified these 2 men are. He gives them a field sobriety test, and then has them follow him back to the police station. Now, one of the pieces of information here that I didn't find very many places, then finally found in an account by Calvin Parker, was that in 1973 he had a brand new car. It was an AMC Hornet Rambler. Are you familiar with that car?
Sure.
Are you?
Yeah. You've never seen a Rambler?
No, I had to look it up. I don't know. It looks like a station wagon, right?
It's a Rambler. I mean, AMC, just a plain Jane car. Something.
Yeah, plain Jane car. We had a brand new one. And when they went back to the car after the encounter, the ship, when it left, had shattered the window in his car.
Oh, wow.
It was shattered in place, and when they opened the door, it fell out of the frame.
I wonder how he explained that to the insurance company.
I have no idea. I want to be on that call. And then when they tried to start the car, it's a brand new car, 1973 brand new car. Never had trouble starting before. They tried to crank it. It wouldn't crank for a little while.
Well, that's pretty common. Having electrical problems in vehicles, near
Oh, yeah,
UFOs.
with UFOs, right. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you was just saying that was common in AMC cars.
Oh, no.
So anyway, they go back to the station and they separate them. They put them in 2 different interrogation cells, interview each one of them separately. And then the sheriff and Officer Ryder, they come up with this idea. It says, look, we're going to catch these guys. They're probably just pulling a hoax on us. They didn't believe them at that point, just thought they were looking for some kind of notoriety. They put a tape recorder in the drawer of the desk in one of the interrogation rooms and then put both of the men in there without letting them know that recorder is running. What they're expecting to get is, hey, look, we're pulling the wool over these guys' eyes. We're telling the story. This is fun, blah, blah, blah. That's not what they get. What they get are 2 men talking to each other about their experience and terrified and out of their minds about, what had just happened to them.
And I would like to point out there is audio available on YouTube. And actually, we'll post a link to this on our website and also on Facebook. And, if you want to listen to it, and I know sometimes we include audio on our show, but the audio is really bad. I mean, it was a tape recorder in a drawer while the 2 men were talking. If you want to listen to it, though, we'll make it easy for you to find it. But, man, it is obvious those men were scared to death whenever they are talking to each other.
So then after that, they take polygraph tests, and they pass them.
You sure?
That's the story I got, and I went to 3 different sources. Did you have something different?
I ran across somewhere that Philip Glass said they refused to take polygraph tests. The well-known skeptic of that era.
Yeah, I saw that too, but that's not true. They took 3 at that point and subsequent ones over the years. One of the complaints that Philip Glass had that I had read was they refused to take a polygraph from someone that he thought was qualified. Okay. He didn't think that the men who gave the original polygraphs were well-trained.
Yeah, well, I mean, Philip Glass is always going to poo-poo anything unless it coincides with his theories of, his explanation of whatever really happened.
So the really interesting thing about 1973 was it was the most number of sightings of UFOs in the 70s and the most number since the 40s. It was what they consider a flap year.
Yeah, 1973 was a huge flap.
They were seeing UFOs in Pascagoula before and after that night where Calvin and Charlie were abducted.
Right. Well, unfortunately for Calvin and for Charles, they had asked the police officers to please keep it quiet. They were worried they would lose their jobs. Everyone would think they were crazy. They just wanted to report it, to let the authorities know this is going on. Like, hey, we just got abducted and people need to be careful or whatever. Well, the police did not keep it quiet. Overnight, it became a national story. I mean, and it really pretty much ruined these guys' lives for a while because half the people's calling them crazy, the people they work with, they didn't want that kind of attention. Everyone coming out of the woodwork, the news networks, national news, and everyone's wanting to interview them, which they did give some interviews. Neither one were very happy at all about the results of this.
Yeah, it was what I found fascinating that is within 36 hours, James Allen Hynek and Dr. James Hardner arrived to interview the men.
Right, and just a little refresher, J. Allen Hynek was the primary scientific consultant all during the Project Blue Book years. He was someone who was an open skeptic at the beginning of the phenomenon. He was even there when they had Project Sign, the very first Air Force investigation, Project Grudge, and then subsequently Project Blue Book. And he had started out as an open skeptic in the 40s and 50s and became a believer by the closure of Project Blue Book. So in the 70s, he still independently investigated UFOs and was probably the most well-known and certainly one of the most well-respected UFO authorities of that era.
And James Hardner was a PhD out of California. He was professor emeritus at the University of California, Berkeley, and had a degree in civil and hydraulic engineering and was well regarded in the field. After that initial follow-up by Hynek and Hardner, there were additional sessions where they were hypnotized. Calvin, in particular, had difficulty managing what had happened to him. He ends up falling off the grid. He moves back to his hometown, and then moves from job to job, in most part due to reporters hounding him at his job. So he started going by the name Randy instead of by his first name Calvin whenever he took on a new job, and laid low for 40 years. However, Charlie did not do that. Charlie went on to go on several television shows, including Johnny Carson and the Dick Cavett Show. He published a book in 1983 called UFO Contact at Pascagoula. Calvin was not really happy with Charlie. He wanted this all just to go away. That is until a few years after Charlie had passed away. So he was contacted by Philip Mantell out of England, and with the help of Calvin's wife, they convinced him to write a book. He ends up writing 2 books, Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story, and he required that Philip allow him to write it his way and to keep all of the misspelling and all the grammatical errors in. He wanted nothing changed, and Philip allowed that to happen. It became the biggest book that Mantell's company had ever published. And then a second follow-up book called Pascagoula, The Story Continues, New Evidence and New Witnesses, stories from other people who were in the area at the time, who also saw the UFO and witnessed, in one case, one of the strange creatures that both Charlie and Calvin claimed to have seen.
Yeah, I know there were several reports of the object. Other people reporting it remembered seeing it that very night or that very evening as the sun was going down.
Yep. There was one woman who was across from them on the east bank of the river. She was waiting for her husband to get off work. He was a shipboat captain or worker. I don't remember which. She's the one who saw the blue saucer in the sky that same night at that same time. She claimed it stayed there for about half an hour before going off into the sky.
Yeah, I think the one thing that really sets this one apart from your average UFO abduction is the fact that this is a shared experience. You just don't get that many stories of the shared experience. I find it very intriguing that the UFO occupants look so different than what is commonly reported today. I feel that the Betty and Barney Hill case of the early 60s became very, very famous, and a made-for-TV movie was made in the mid-70s. But that movie did not come out until 1975 or 1976. So this UFO abduction predated that. I often wonder, and then, it seems like after that, they kind of set the precedent for what a UFO abduction looks like, with the gray aliens with the large eyes. And the description of the aliens, I don't know if there's any other ones out there, there may be, but the descriptions of the robotic, strange, elephant-skinned creatures that abducted them and brought them on board the ship, and just some of those descriptions are very unique. Again, just them being recorded secretly in the police station, a record of which is available now that you can listen to yourself, convinces me that something happened. These men at least believe something happened to them, and I find it highly unlikely that they would have some kind of collaborative, hypnotic, experience that the details would be so similar.
Yeah, I mean, there are other parts to this story. It's really hard for me to decide because I tend to take the skeptic side on these things. That's how I approach these stories, and this one is a bit more convincing than most, if not all of the other ones. I mean, the Travis Walton case is probably the close second, or let's not say a close second, a second.
Yeah.
But this one, it's hard to say what really something happened to these men.
Right.
That I'm sure of.
Although Charles Hickson seemed to not mind the limelight or maybe even enjoyed the limelight, it's quite obvious Calvin Parker wanted nothing to do with this. The idea to say, hey, they want, trying to make money, they come up with this story to, publish a book or something. Well, Charles Hickson published his first book 10 years after this happened. 10 years.
And,
so, it seems like
never really
they
made money off of it either.
Right. And I mean, it seems like if they had some plan to, hey, let's come up with this crazy story. UFOs are real popular right now. Again, 1973, a big UFO flap. The idea that they came up with this story about being abducted and hey, let's stick to our story. Let's say we were abducted and we'll make a lot of money. I think it's just ridiculous. I think that it had a very negative impact on these men's lives. in particular Calvin Parker. As you had stated, he changed his name, moved out of town, and wanted it to be forgotten about, didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, so I don't know what the relationship of the two men were prior to that night, but that was actually Calvin Parker's first day at work.
Mm-hmm. At a shipyard.
Yeah, at a shipyard. And Charlie had been the one that got him the job. They went fishing. Calvin was so new to the area that he didn't have his fishing gear with him, hadn't brought it back from his hometown, where he just recently moved from. So Charlie had offered him up some of his spare gear. Calvin thought was really cool because I guess in that time, his experiences were that people didn't lend their fishing gear out to other people. Not my experiences, but he pointed out as he thought was very cool of Charlie to do that for him.
Mm-hmm. There's a historical marker there at that site now.
That's right. They put it there in 2019 to commemorate what they consider the most compelling UFO abduction case in modern UFO history. And, you know, I gotta say it's something happened. Certainly. I mean, the guy's window in his car was busted out. They both had injection points on their arm. Maybe they were out getting drunk and doing psychedelics. But then, I mean, they contact the police right after that. Doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah, and well, to me, it's like, how do you say it's sleep paralysis, or how do you say it was some kind of shared hallucination when they have such similar stories? I mean, I don't know how that happens. How would that happen? I don't know. I'm not an expert, but it just seems to, I mean, all the signs point toward these men most certainly believe they had this experience.
In recent years, even more instances of validation of the story emerged. More than 24 witnesses have come forward with their own reports of UFO sightings on or around the Pascagoula River in Jackson County in the week surrounding October 11th. One man reported seeing a large ship floating over the river from the cab of his crane while he was working at night. A couple reported seeing a large vessel with blue lights flying low over the waters they drove over a bridge. When a man went to visit his aunt the day after that, who also lived in that area, she said, "You'll never guess what I saw last night." And it was a blue light in the sky. Another couple said they were waiting on the opposite bank. This was the story I was talking about earlier, where a woman was waiting for her husband to come in from work. And when he got in the car, she saw blue lights across the river and a gray creature come into the water. The woman's husband said, "Don't tell anybody we saw this. They'll think we're nuts."
Yeah, I mean, and I wonder too, just as I'd pointed out earlier, if this experience did happen to someone, how many times does something like this actually happen and nobody talks about it? Or they just tell a close friend or tell their family. You know, I bet it happens more than you think. When this happens, you don't automatically have to go public. In fact, I would say that most people don't, because look at the negative attention they receive. I think it's likely that other people were abducted or taken and just decided never to talk about it, or were so disturbed by the experience that they never talked about it. I mean, didn't you had a story just a few episodes ago about the man after he retired and finally wrote a book about camping with his friends, the lawyer? You know?
Oh yeah, I'm still going to look into that. The book is something like UFO Encounter over Devil's Ridge or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's
that's Terry Lovelace.
Had nothing to gain. I mean, sure, he published a book because he had a story to tell. I mean, at the time, he didn't talk about it. He didn't want to ruin his professional career. I don't know, man. I think, I mean, again, I think a lot of UFO abductions probably can be explained away by things like sleep paralysis and that sort of thing. And there's been some books published on it. If you ever watch a documentary, especially one that wants to have a little, debunking going on, there's a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Her name is Susan Clancy, and she has published a book about, let me just pull her info up here. So she's a cognitive psychologist and associate professor, as well as a postdoctoral fellow at Harvard University. And she's best known for her work on repressed and recovered memories in her books Abducted and The Trauma Myth. And so a lot of the information when you hear about sleep paralysis or whatever, they bring her out all the time when they have an abduction story, whenever they want to show the scientific explanation of why people have these abduction experiences. They always interview her. In the book Abducted, she had interviewed 11 abductees and discussed their experiences in the book. When she reached her conclusions at the end of the book about how they'd all been hypnotized and this sort of thing, and she believed all these memories were just fantasies that they'd come up with on their own. She didn't tell the abductees whose experiences were included in her book that that's what she was writing about, right? And so they became very upset, quite a few of them did actually, once they found out what her game was all about. But one thing I would like to point out about her in particular is that she's a very controversial figure in the whole world of psychoanalysis, because she believes that many memories of trauma victims, people who have memories of being abducted or abused, I should say, as children, that those memories are later recovered by hypnosis. She questions the validity of that. When she started researching that, I think she had written a paper. She got a lot of hate mail and a lot of anger toward her saying, looks like you're trying to protect child abusers or pedophiles and things like that. So that's why she decided to change her research to the abductee thing, thinking, oh, this will be a safe subject. I can talk about it now because who's going to believe people that think they've been abducted by flying saucers?
So, I think we're getting close to wrapping this up. One of the things, I guess, coming out in the next couple of years, in the same vein of all of this Pascagoula stuff, is that an author, Dr. Irina Scott, she's a physiologist, and she's written several books in the UFO arena. She wrote a book called Beyond Pascagoula that was released in October of this year, and she has another book called The Pascagoula Close Encounter: Witnesses on the Record, which will be released sometime in 2022. It covers additional witnesses that she went around, interviewed, and then compiled it into this book. I believe this is one that's in the book. November 6th of that same year, 2 fishing vessels were out on the river, a total of 10 passengers. The fishing party said they saw something large and illuminated floating beneath the surface of the water, which they hit with an oar before playing a type of cat and mouse game with the vessel, chasing it around the river. They reported the encounter to the Coast Guard, who sent out a boat and experienced exactly the same thing.
The Coast Guard ship hit it with an oar?
I don't know that they hit it with an oar, but they followed it around and identified it was there and wrote up a report, and they have the report, all the documentation. They located a photograph of the 10 witnesses in the fishing party, and with the help of social media, tracked down one and interviewed them, who confirmed the account. So that's the kind of research they went out to go and find these witnesses in that area, and they've put together another book that's going to come out in 2022. And in addition to that book, Flying Disc Press, which I think is Philip Mantle's production company, is working on a graphic novel about the abduction, and also a 3-part documentary series based on Parker's stories been picked up by a UK broadcasting company. And a 5-part drama series is currently in discussions with a number of production companies as well.
You know, the very first time I ever heard about this case, I was a kid. I used to love reading horror comics and science fiction type comics. It was in some comic book that I had and had the drawings of the creatures and everything. I remember it very well. I may still have a copy of that comic book around here somewhere. But yeah, I was a kid when I read it. And they were like, this is a true story. This really happened in Pascagoula. And they told the whole story in a comic book form. So pretty cool.
Have you seen pictures of the 3
drawings?
creatures?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. They sort of remind me maybe of like The Day the Earth Stood Still, that original version of that movie. Doesn't it?
A little bit. What's it called? Clot 2?
A little bit.
Or something?
Yeah, Clot 2. Like the band.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit maybe. I mean, yeah, I can see your point on that. But on the other hand, it's all wrinkly, and I know the movie didn't look like that. Other than the robotic nature of them seemed more in tune with that than the wrinkled up skin, the way it pointed on the sides, the clawed fingers. I don't know. But anyway, fascinating case. I don't know that I have anything really to add to this one. Again, I think it's one of the most convincing UFO abduction stories out there.
Well, let's do this. 1 to 10. 1 to 10, where would you put this one?
I can't believe you're bringing the scale back out.
I'm bringing the scale back.
7 or 8, for sure.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm right there with you. I might even go higher than that.
Yeah. I mean, if something happened, and I just don't think this was a fabricated story by those two men at all.
No, something definitely happened to him. Now, whether it was a spaceship, that's why it doesn't get a 10. It's a
yeah,
a 7
you need
or
that
8.
ashtray, right? That alien ashtray.
I need the ashtray. I need something I can test.
Right. Well, all right, man. Well, I think we're going to wrap this episode up right here. But before we go, I'd like to remind everyone to please rate and review the podcast. And not only that, I want you to tell a friend. I want you to tell a coworker. You can tell somebody you even hate. Just tell somebody,
As long as they like UFOs and Bigfoots.
Right. Help spread the show. If you like what you're hearing, tell your friends and family about us and, tell them to tune in and give us a go, right? If you'd like to support the show, please go to our webpage and look for the coffee cup icon, buy me a coffee. While you're on our webpage, which is cosmicsponge.com, also check out all of our episodes are posted there and check out the web store. Our contact information is firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Look for us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, where you'll read many of the news stories that you've heard on this show. Jimmy?
Well done, Steven.
You got anything else?
I don't have anything else. You're doing so well.
All right. Well, with all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
And Jimmy Coe, keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground. Catch you next week.
Good?
Very good.
What are you having there?
A Chardonnay. I got a
Chardonnay.
I got a cab blend, but I haven't tried yet. It looks
It's Chardonnay. Is it like a Canadian wine? See, we should be doing this on the podcast.
You're such an idiot. Chardonnay. It's Canadian.
See, that should have been on the podcast. Let's start it.
I've been recording this whole time, so.
Oh. Okay. Maybe stick that on the end or something.
Okay, we'll do.
That would be funny, a fade out after the music and then just come in with that.
Okay. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.